you can't possibly aim to fight anti-Semitism simply by calling it out. You also need to be stronger in who you are. She was in Auschwitz for 5 months, then transferred to a munitions factory as a subcamp at Buchenwald, and was then liberated by the American Jewish soldier. And he wanted to give her a note of kindness, that she would remember him. He looked for a piece of paper, he couldn't find it. He pulls out an American banknotes and he inscribes 10 words on it: the start to a new life, good luck and happiness, with a click of a single button on something that many of us carry with us every single day. For me, it was that blue button that said tweet. You can reach tens of millions of people. And so I just continued, and I said to her every day, let's just share one more thing.
The messianic end of history is built out of warmth, smiles and goodness. The antidote to darkness and hatred is just genuineness and goodness. Hi everyone and welcome back to another episode of Real Talk with Rabbi Rowe. Today I'm very excited. We have the famous Dov Forman. If you haven't heard of him, you may well have heard of his great-grandmother, Lily Ebert, an incredible woman, Holocaust survivor, passed away just over a year ago, and who really made waves thanks to Dov, who really put her on the TikTok map. Dov, it's a pleasure to have you with me.
A pleasure to be here with you.
Before we start together, we're going to actually look at some clips of some of those videos that have gone crazily viral. Those of you, by the way, who love this content, please do remember to like, to subscribe, and to click on the notification button. And let's dive in and look at one or two of these amazing clips of this most incredible woman, your great-grandmother. Okay.
It was not life. We were only a number. I saw that humans can lose their humanity. We had no food, we had no water. How can anybody explain a factory of death?
So Dov, question, like, what got that started? Like, it's my wife's grandmother is a Holocaust survivor, somebody we admire so much. She took trips to Auschwitz, did Holocaust education. She would never have dreamed of going on TikTok or anything. I don't even know what TikTok was. Like, what's the story?
It's a funny story. When I first showed my great-grandmother TikTok, she said, "What is this?" And I kind of scrolled through a few videos to show her, and it was people doing stupid, silly videos, dancing, etc. And she said, "Dov, I'll do it, but I'm not dancing." But the story, the story actually doesn't start there. It starts with my great-grandmother in the 1980s beginning to share her testimony in schools, in faith places, in workplaces across the country in the United Kingdom, travelling every single day, dedicating her life to it after her husband passed away, to making sure that the horrors that she witnessed, and also that the names of her mother, her younger sister and youngest brother, Nina, Berta and Bela Engelman, would never be forgotten. And she did that for decades, up until COVID broke out. And suddenly she was stuck at home, and she wasn't able to do what she had loved doing, what gave her purpose, but also essentially was all she knew every single day, which was to go out to educate young children, people in their workplaces, etc., and people who needed to hear these messages, not only about what happened in the past, but also how you apply those lessons to your life, and also about positive things too, about the fact that you can get through the darkest parts of humanity, the darkest depths of human history, and get through it and rebuild and have a large and loving family and have a smile on your face. And my great-grandmother moved in with us during the lockdown, and she was very sad that she wasn't able to do this. So I said to her, "Safta, we have to start sharing your testimony online." And she said, "Let's start by me just telling you more details of my story." And as that went along, I said, "Do you have anything that you can show me, perhaps, that I could share with the world?" Right. And we went to her flat one day. She's rummaging around the cupboard, and she pulls out a Maccabi Tel Aviv signed shirt, and she says, "You'll love this." And I said, no, I don't want to share that with the world. She said, "I went to speak there, they gave me this shirt." I said, no, show me something from the time of the Holocaust. And she continues to rummage around, and she pulls out this banknote, which an American Jewish liberator had given to her upon liberation on Friday the 13th of April 1945, wow, from liberation from the Death March in Leipzig. She was in Auschwitz for 5 months, then transferred to a munitions factory as a subcamp at Buchenwald, and was then liberated by the American Jewish soldier. And he wanted to give her a note of kindness, that she would remember him and all that he and his fellow soldiers had done for them. He looked for a piece of paper, he couldn't find it. He pulls out an American banknotes, and he inscribes 10 words on it: the start to a new life, good luck and happiness. Wow. And he didn't put his name, he just put his Hebrew name, and he put the assistant to Chaplain Schachter, who was one of the first rabbis to liberate a concentration and death camp. He liberated Buchenwald, amongst others. He wrote that part in English, but his name in Hebrew. So we could never find him. She didn't. Well, she understood a few words, but not. Wow. She didn't speak English, and she had kept this banknote for 76 years at the time in the back of her cupboards, completely in pristine condition, in a laminated kind of packet. And I couldn't believe that A, she had never shared this with anyone, B, that she had kept it. I mean, after the war, she could have obviously used it. She had no money, no belongings, went to Switzerland, was trying to rebuild her life. I'm sure she could have cashed in this banknote for whatever it was worth. And she kept it because that kindness meant so much to her. Wow. And it was the first moment that she was transformed to normality in some sense. Wow. And I said to her, Safta, we have to share this. And I joked with her, I bet you will be able to find the soldier. I myself didn't really believe it. But I shared it on Twitter, and within 24 hours, 8 million people had seen it, and we managed to find the soldier and his family. Wow. He had passed away, but his wife and his family were still alive in New Jersey, and we connected with them on a video call, and as you can imagine, this made headlines throughout the whole world. It turned into an international mystery hunt for this soldier. People, historians from all over the world were trying to piece together, and they found this assistant who had written letters home every day during the war. Chaplain Schachter had a few assistants, but they found this one. And in one of his letters, he writes about stumbling across 500 Hungarian Jewish women who were Auschwitz survivors and then were taken to this munitions factory. And he liberated them, and he writes about this in his letter. And they realised it must be the same person. And that was the moment when I realised that social media, whilst we all know how terrible it can be and how damaging it can also be incredibly powerful. And when used in the right way, with a click of a single button on something that many of us carry with us every single day, for me it was that blue button that said tweet, you can reach tens of millions of people. And so I just continued, and I said to her, every day, let's just share one more thing. Let's do a video together. And then a few months later, we started on TikTok as that started to go viral. And for me, it was also kind of very helpful because COVID started for me. My GCSEs, my exams were cancelled, school was cancelled. And for the first few weeks, I played video games like most people all day long. And this, other than kind of praying every day and things like that, gave me structure. And it really gave me something meaningful in my life, which, whilst for many COVID was a very, very difficult time, for me it became a very meaningful time to spend that time with my great-grandmother. I'm incredibly lucky to have even had a great-grandmother, but then even more lucky to have had such intimate time with her for months on end, every single day, interviewing her and sharing those stories and taking videos, which now, thank God, have been seen over 1 billion times by people all over the world.
Amazing, absolutely amazing. I want to zoom in on something which I think is very profound when I've seen your great-grandmother's your videos and her videos. And it resonates really with the world that we're seeing today. The explosion of anti-Semitism, the resurgence of a Jew hatred that I think a lot of people thought was in the past.
Right.
And there's a few different dimensions to it. One is, let's maybe deal with a few different things. One is that I feel this, maybe you feel differently, but I feel that our Holocaust education was very powerful in what actually happened, right? Connecting with the tragedies and the life before, the horrific stories during, and the survival afterwards, which I want to come back to. But I think there's a piece, perhaps, that the world's not been so educated about. Like we may have almost over-educated, oversaturated Holocaust education. But how it happened in the first place. How did we get from Germany being the world's most sophisticated, advanced, liberal, democratic society with people of such knowledge and academic prowess and culture into monsters capable of mass murdering our grandparental generation. And, you know, I know one of my grandfathers left Germany in the 1920s, and at the time he left, they thought it was rising anti-Semitism, it'll all be gone. And he saw the legal world turn against the Jewish people. He saw the academic world turn against the media, people who had been defenders wobbling. He saw narratives. It wasn't just let's all hate Jews. It was narratives of the Jews are responsible for World War I, and people said that's a fringe, ridiculous thing to say. Then it became more mainstream. And he said anti-Semitism is not Jew hatred, it's Jew demonization. And it begins with this portrayal of the collective Jew as demonic, yes, there might have been some banker somewhere as Jewish who gained from World War I. There might have been an anti-German Jew in Poland, but turning this into a narrative and slowly sweeping society and quickly and of course there's parallels to what's happening today. And I've felt this a lot lately, that people can't see it coming because they don't understand what the process is.
I totally agree, and I think in many respects Holocaust education has failed. I'll be the first to say that, and I've said that many times, and I think there's many reasons, and we can touch on them, but one of those reasons is that. And I think people aren't aware that ordinary people could do this. when you talk about someone like Dr. Mengele, he had a doctorate. These were some of the most, as you said, educated, sophisticated, civilized people on earth who, through a successful campaign of othering the Jews, as we see, by the way, today with Zionists and therefore Jews, when we are seen as completely inherently evil and completely other, completely pushed to the fringes of society. If we look at the UK as a case study, the NHS, Jews are pushed to the fringes. Arts, culture, Jews are pushed to the fringes. Look at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, which is where young and up-and-coming comedians and artists are meant to be able to share their work. All the Jews who were meant to be platformed at Edinburgh Fringe this year, their events were suddenly cancelled for safety reasons that no other community had, with no explanation, no extra security provided, because they were Jewish. And that's that step-by-step, drip-by-drip anti-Semitism, which leads to the demonization of Jews, and also, by the way, leads to ordinary people, our neighbours, turning on us. And that doesn't mean that every single person hates Jews, but it does mean that an ordinary person who is scrolling on their feeds every day, who is seeing these completely made up, falsified, exaggerated stories about Jews, about Israelis, about Israel, the only Jewish state, that does lead to ordinary people changing their minds about the Jew, about their neighbour. And my great-grandmother was always so troubled about how the same people that she grew up with, the same people that she played with 3 weeks before the Nazi invasion of Hungary in March 1944, 3 weeks later, broke into her home, sent them to the ghettos, stole all of their belongings, and then waved them off. Not even waved them off, pushed them off as they were sent to the deportations only 3 weeks later to Auschwitz-Birkenau, along with 500,000 other Hungarian Jews, 400,000 plus of them who were murdered within 6 weeks, over 5 to 10,000 every single day. And how do you get to that point? It's, as you say, it's through a twisted road where ordinary people like Jews are demonized, but also ordinary people are completely radicalized into seeing the Jew as the other. And as you say, because we haven't done that, because we haven't educated about that, and that's what me and my great-grandmother tried to do, but possibly needed to do more of and continue to need to do more of, but because we haven't done that, as you say, I think people today can't see those warning signs, can't see that the anti-Semitism that was kind of bubbling under the surface for so many years before October 7th has now spilled way over, and those people who were planning those campaigns of how, and by the way, countries, Iran, Qatar, were planning those campaigns, Turkey, against the Jews. Those people who were planning that and are now successfully implementing it, they have succeeded because we didn't educate people in what does that mean when they're Jew and when their nation state is completely othered and completely seen as inherently evil. And we see that because no one, when Russia illegally invades Ukraine and kills, I mean, the death toll is probably over 1 million people, no one goes and attacks a Russian person on the street of London for what the country that they have citizenship of is doing. And firstly, not most Jews in the UK don't even have Israeli citizenship, but that's besides the point. No one attacks Chinese people over the Uyghur concentration camps and the genocide that's happening there. No one attacks Rwandan people for the genocide that happened there. No one attacks Bosnian people. The list could go on. But people always attack the Jew. And that's because they do succeed time and time again throughout history, as they did in the ancient times and as they do today, in othering us and pushing us to the complete fringes of society. And people always say to me, is there going to be a one moment when everyone leaves the UK? When all the Jews leave the UK? I don't think that's the case, but I do think that more and more Jews are waking up to the fact that we are being pushed to those margins and that red line is nearing and coming closer. And that's not to say that Jews are going to be slaughtered on the street of London one day, but it is to say that life is going to continue to get more and more uncomfortable, and that anti-Semitism is not going to go away with a ceasefire or with the end of the war, however fragile that ceasefire may be, because it's not. In fact, it's only getting more extreme. And that's because that campaign has totally succeeded.
Right. And I think there's a separate dimension as well, which is a lot of people who are infected by the virus of anti-Semitism, I always call it that, it's a social pathological virus, don't recognize that they themselves are anti-Semitic. That's the powerful thing.
Exactly.
And the reason is because anti-Semitism was, of course, a 19th century German word to try to turn the traditional Jew demonization into a racial issue. Yes. And so a lot of people, I don't want to name too many names, but on the left and the far right would say, possibly even pass a lie detector test and say, I'm not anti-Semitic, right? Because I'm not against the Jewish race. I'm not going to persecute somebody because they were born Jewish,
exactly.
Right? But the social pathology is not that. And it is, I want to talk about this actually, the difference in the trajectory between what racism, bigotry is, where there is a bit against Jews, but there's against lots of other groups even more so maybe, versus what real Jew demonization is, which is a different issue.
I think also that people associate anti-Semitism with the Nazis, and so they say to themselves, well, I'm not a Nazi,
Right.
I'm not anti-Semitic, which is why I try and use the word anti-Jew hatred, because that's what it is, or anti-Jewish racism, that's the term which resonates with people more, but it isn't just racism, because
That's the point.
it's not against us as a race, as you
Yeah.
say. It's much more than that, and as Rabbi Sachs famously said, they used to hate us because we were capitalist, then we were communist, then they hated us because of our religion, then they hated us because we were monotheistic, then they hated us because of, this is not in order, and not as profound as he said it, but the list goes on, and today they hate us because of our nation state, and that's to prove that it's not racism, because they hated us throughout the era for every single excuse that they could find.
And the best secular explanation for that, there's plenty of religious ones, is the place of the Jew in the consciousness of mankind, because we are in their religious texts. That's true of the Christian religion, it's true of the Islamic religion, it's true in a very different way of the early communists and so on, the inner struggle of many of them having been Jews or come from Jewish families and rejected it. And the rejection Jewish narrative is a complex one, chosen rejection, all these, which either makes people love Jews or hate. And hatred comes with a moral language. It's very interesting. I often point this out to people, that people who hate blacks just say they hate them because they're different. People who hate most groups hate them because they're different, or they're a threat, or this or that. Jew is hated always with a moral language. So like when Jews were moneylenders of Europe, people hated moneylenders. Look at these poor people struggling with money. Then when the Jews stopped being the moneylenders of Europe in Italian banking families, lending is part of an economy, right? Or when Jews were living in ghettos, there was a moral crime to being these poor people who spread diseases. And when Jews left the ghetto, now there's a moral crime with these people taking over society. So there's always a moral language. It's very interesting. It's like, you guys are devilish, evil. And now, of course, it's shocking. Like, you can really oppose what Israel did in the Gaza war. You can cry for the loss of life for Palestinians. But to take a war where 99% of the civilian population survived the war, which never happened before, and call it a genocide, it's insane. So there's that. And I guess this was a really interesting thing. I don't know if you came across this research recently, but there's an amazing piece of research just a few months ago, that when you take the standard curriculum in American schools, let's say the ADL's curriculum, and show people racism against blacks or against Native Americans or any group, and you show them their material, it actually has a bit of an effect of, not only does it impact people to be much less racist, they actually become a bit too extreme in their anti-racism. They're likely to see racism where it doesn't exist. You show them a scenario that isn't racist, and they're like, oh, this guy should be fired. Like, somebody fires somebody who happens to have a different skin color. They should be punished and so on. The one group that's is an exception is Jewish people. It has the exact opposite effect. You show them exactly the parallel material, and now they become more anti-Semitic. I don't know, do you ever come across that?
I come across this myself in social media, obviously, not in a classroom setting, because that's not what I do, but so many times I post small instances. I try and show people the drip by drip, the way that it affects daily life, because I think there's the big incidents, Bondi Beach, the Manchester terrorist attacks. Everyone finds this shocking. If they don't, where is their moral compass? But it's those small things, and by the way, even those who don't find it shocking pretend to, because they want to seem moral and they want to give lip service, and fine. But it's those little small things which people don't take so seriously, but ultimately and cumulatively, those are the things which make Jews feel like we're being pushed to the fringes, back to that conversation we had earlier, that do push us to the fringes and do make us question our future in countries where we have lived safely, at least for the past 8 decades, but possibly even longer in countries like America and the UK, and make us question, especially in the UK, whether Europe, 80 years after the Holocaust, is a safe place for Jews again. I mean, how shocking is that? But I see on social media, when I share these things, for example, a friend of mine on a Jewish winter camp for children who was taking a child to hospital, kicked out of an Uber because the driver was telling him that Jews charge interest and they're money grabbers, and then said, what do you think of the Gaza war and the genocide? And the guy simply replied that it's not genocide. He said, stop the car on the main road, kick them out, 3 a.m. I try and share things like that, and people are saying me, A, it's fake, but deny is another conversation. But even those who acknowledge it as real say the Jews deserve it. Or this, who cares? Again, the Jews, they have another country to go to, and then you go to Israel, which is the only Jewish homeland, and they say you need to leave. You need to go back to Europe.
That's it.
So I see this kind of perverse reality the whole time, which is you educate people about the reality of being Jewish in the modern era, or even you educate people about the reality of being Jewish in the 20th century when there was the Holocaust, or in the times of the pogroms, the time of the blood libel. You educate people about these things, and they say the Jews deserve it. Or, well, why are you telling me about this? I don't care. What about this racism? What about that? There's all this whataboutery. And people never want to learn, never want to hear about the Jews. And so I think that's why it's important, and this is what I try to do, to simply put it on a human level as much as possible. And if it cuts through or not, I don't know what we can do about that. But I think the best way that I've found, and the same goes for the Holocaust and why much of Holocaust education has failed, because we teach people on lectures without actually giving them individual stories that could be someone like them, like you or I, someone, I don't know, who's 22 years old, who lived a religious life, etc. If you show someone who's similar to them, someone who they can empathise with, I think they might start to acknowledge that slightly more. Someone who is English, who's lived in England for generations, their family, they see a Jew posting about something that happened to them, same age, same university, same kind of similar upbringing, the only difference is that he's Jewish. I think they might start to sympathise with that. Of course, I've seen that it doesn't always have that effect, but I have also seen successes.
Right.
But certainly, I think that research is probably right.
It's also shocking. It's like, and I remember I actually spoke to one of the main researchers because I was very shocked by it, and they're trying to understand why it might be. And one of the theories is that whenever you show people discrimination, it kind of puts people into a bit of a shock mode, and they revert to, well, who's the victim, who's the aggressor, and people struggle to see Jews as victims.
Yes.
That's one issue. And another issue might just be they feel guilted. Like they've heard so much about Holocaust. It's almost like some people think when you talk about the Holocaust, you're blaming them.
Yes.
And that can also then produce a negative, and once people have a negative emotional reaction, they're going to look for an excuse, and that may explain why there's so much prevalence of trying to use Holocaust language against Israel, which now represent the Jewish people in absurd ways. But what was very interesting, and this led me straight back to what you do, is when I asked him, so what does work in reducing anti-Semitism? And they're struggling with this to fully understand it, but it was the types of Jewish values that can be seen as universal values, talking about the Bible, talking about, or even leaving the Bible out of it, justice and things like this. When you stop talking about racism and discrimination against Jews and talk about making people proud of values that we call Judeo-Christian or whatever you want to call them, there's something that drops the anti-Semitism, fascinatingly enough. I don't know exactly what the magic is.
I think also in this strange world, just before I answer that, there's also this strange reality that people have Holocaust fatigue. People learn about it in school, they then grow up, they have anti-Semitism fatigue. They hear about this the whole time. If they are anti-Semitic and they have narratives that like the Jews control the media, they think, well, why are the Jews always on the media talking about anti-Semitism? If they're not, they say, well, this is ridiculous. Like, no, they're wrong. But in their eyes, they say no other minority gets this much airtime for the anti-Semitism they face or the racism they face. That's obviously because no one else receives the same level of abuse that the Jews do, especially in 2024, 2025, 2026. But just back to what you said, I think so much of what I tried to do with my great-grandmother was to show Judaism in a positive light, to show how she was the queen of our family. Every Friday, every Shabbat, we'd get together. Some of our most watched videos are her simply saying Shabbat Shalom in 5 languages to people and explaining what Shabbat is, or cooking challah with my mother and her granddaughters and great-grandchildren, lighting the Hanukkah candles together. These are things which show Jewish pride, which show us being proud of who we are. And again, another Rabbi Sachs quote is that anti-Semites love Jews who aren't proud of being Jewish, who aren't proud of being who they are. And when they try and trample us and when they try and push us down, we need to raise our heads even higher and walk taller and be proud of Jews. And that's not me trying to say everyone needs to become religious and whatever. People could do what they want. I'm not the rabbi. But ultimately, we do need to be proud of who we are and our identity. And so many people, and I'm shocked by this, you go to schools and they don't know our history and they don't know what being Jewish stands for. And that's not from a religious standpoint.
You mean
I'm just
talking
talking
about
about
Jewish.
Right. I'm just talking about ideologically, what our values are, who we are, what we stand for, what our history is. And I think you can't possibly aim to fight anti-Semitism simply by calling it out. You also need to be stronger in who you are. And we've seen that with so many other communities and minorities in the way that they fight their racism. They become much stronger in their identities. And for some reason, that hasn't happened as of yet, really, with the wider Jewish community. Of course, certain people. But I haven't seen that on a wide scale. And I think especially, by the way, and this is a big tangent, but with the Israel-Gaza war, so many on the other side are so educated about every point. Even if their education is wrong and it's false, they know exactly what they want to say. And you meet a Jew on the street, and this isn't a criticism, but they have no idea. They wouldn't know what to answer if someone even asked them about the numbers or the civilian casualties, etc. And I think that's a failure of Jewish education in a way, that we haven't educated our children, people who are my age and younger, to be equipped in firstly being proud Jews and understanding what our values really are, and to be able to share those with the world, but also to be able to just answer simple questions about the Jewish reality in our world today. And it shouldn't be that we have to be ambassadors, but we are. And so we need to adapt to the fact that that's who we are today in the world.
Yeah, it's interesting actually because maybe it's more in Israel, but you do hear of what's called the October 8th Jew. You do hear some reconnection that's come out of a lot of this. I wonder, but I want to go back to this point about the success of your great grandmother, because to me, I think a lot of this is now my little theory here. That a lot of anti-Semitism is a bit of a cry of help. And I tell you a great story that my thank God, Liana, are seven children I have. One of my younger ones suffered very strong tantrums at a certain age when he's very young. And in a rage, and any child could say this, but he once said, "Daddy, I hate you." And that's not a nice thing for a parent to hear, hadn't done anything wrong to him. And my wife said to me, a very wise point, he doesn't mean, "Daddy, I hate you." He means, "Daddy, I need something from you and you're not giving it to me." And I always say this, if an alien came down from another planet and tried to study what humanity is about, and they came to where the world leaders gather, the UN, and they figured that 70% of everything they discuss is the Jews, is Israel. It's absurd. There can be 30 wars going on in the world, there can be famines, this is the target, and it doesn't matter if there's a war in Israel or not, every single year. They would conclude that somewhere in the subconscious of mankind is this weird sense that these Jewish people are responsible for what's wrong in the world, but the flip side is, somewhere in the subconscious of mankind is a belief that Jewish people are going to help the world, which we run away. No, we're just like everyone else. But it's almost like they're saying we're not going to treat like everybody else. And what I think the power and the magic of what your grandmother's videos were, leave aside whether I'm right or wrong on what I just said, the world saw something you so rarely see, somebody who lived through hell on earth, worse than anyone can imagine, and somebody who came out and isn't preachy and isn't resentful, and no doubt is in immense pain to the day they left this world, no doubt suffers nightmares they probably never talk about, but who's able to be positive, not be a victim, is able to rebuild, is able to draw on the flame of a faith and not make others feel guilty, but make others feel greater people because of her. I suspect that's the magic that drew people.
I think that's exactly right. I mean, people ask me why I had success in inverted comments on social media with my great grandmother, and I always said that was one of the key reasons. It's because we showed someone, especially at the time of COVID, when people needed that light so much. We showed someone, as you say, who was in the darkest of tunnels, who saw the light and didn't give up on it, and who continued running towards it for her whole life. Because, as you say, she lived with that pain until the day she died. And it could have been easy for her at any moment to begin hating, even if she didn't straight after, to begin being resentful, to begin questioning things. And she didn't. She carried on with her life. And of course, there was so much trauma and pain there, and that's a whole other world to open. But she built a family of 10 grandchildren, 38 great-grandchildren, 1 great-great-grandchild, which she lived to see, 5 strong Jewish generations. She went back to Auschwitz not to show anger. Never, ever did I hear her utter a word of hate towards anyone, especially not the Germans. And I never even heard her say, I mean, I'm sure she did, but I never even heard her say that she hated the Nazis. I mean, she said terrible things about them, but I never heard her say the word hate. And because I think she made a conscious decision. After that, she knew what hate really means, what hating another human being really means. And she always used to say, this was like her famous quote when she went to schools, she would always end by saying, no matter what race, ethnicity, religion, colour, God you believe in, language you speak, when you cut us, for every single person in the world it hurts, and we will all bleed the same colour, and that colour will be red, no matter who you cut. Yeah. And I think that's that universal language which people understood. And they didn't want to hear, as you say, those guilty messages and those sad messages, though we shared those videos and some of them individually got 20+ million views. Right. But some of our most successful videos were her smiling, were her educating in a positive sense about how you can get through things in life.
And can it's amazing because I felt this also, thank God my grandparents all got out before the war, some towards just before. But when I met, I'd always known my wife's grandmother because she lived around the corner. They hardly spoke about the Holocaust till about the 80s or whatever. But when we got close, it was very similar. And the incredible thing is, and this was true as she spoke in Jewish schools, non-Jewish schools, is people, this is not a rabbi, this is not a famous person, there's something living inside them. That same thing, no hate, no this, no rebuilding.
Exactly. In
a humble, simple way. And there's something so authentic. And something, see, it's interesting, as Jewish people, we're quite conscious of the traumas that we've inherited. I think a lot of people in the world look to us as having inherited some power of faith, of goodness, that the survivors did when they rebuilt. They literally, they never, I mean, individually I'm sure lots of them did, but as a collective, it wasn't about resentment, about revenge, about anger, about blame. It was, we've been through let's give birth to something even greater. Exactly. Yeah, they built a state of Israel. They built the greatest Jewish learning revolutions. They built hospitals and institutions all over the world. They built, wherever they went to every country, said, we've got to be a blessing to this place. And I think a lot of people, again, we don't like to have it, we like to just be like everyone else, but a lot of people look to us and shine that goodness, we need it. A lot of people, I believe, saw your great-grandmother like, I can connect to this because she's not like this, whatever, like, but yet there's something magical here. There's a wellspring here. There's a good, she's tapping into something she might not be conscious of that previous generations gave her. Yeah. Whether it's faith, whether it's goodness, whether it's positivity, whether it's talking about godliness. She's shining a light in an incredible way, but in such a simple, natural and humble way. She's not trying to.
Exactly.
That's the magic. That's the incredible thing.
Quite, and I think people always used to say like the smile, the light in her eyes, it was something which just inspired people just even looking at her, even if you watched a video without the sound. And I think it's all of what you say. And also that you speak about revenge. The only revenge she wanted was to have a large family, because her family had been murdered, and that wasn't even revenge. But the quote she gave when she had a fifth generation, a great grandchild, how lucky she was this is my revenge.
That's
the Nazis tried to kill me, and not only me, they succeeded in killing over 100 members of her extended family, and look where I am today, she said. Look where I am and look where they are. And that's what the Jewish story is. And also I think she realised, because she was there and because so much of her family had been murdered, that she was this link in an unbreakable chain, not only to her family but to the Jewish people. I remember she once told me that when she was in Auschwitz, she thought that only the few people that survived with her might be the only Jewish survivors in the whole world. Who knew what was going on? Who knew where the Nazis were advancing to? And so for her, it was that if she survived, she needs to be that link. She needs to be that light, and she needs to show the world how goodness can come back in, how kindness. And I think that goes back to that banknote. Why did she keep that banknote?
Yeah.
It's because of the piece. She told me, but even if she didn't, it's obvious. Why would you keep a banknote which had no value anymore and which you could have exchanged for something else with a few words? I mean, who cares about the few words? But it was the kindness that she held on to. It was that goodness, that humanity can be better, that humanity can be greater, and that attachment to, at the darkest moment, that angelic figure, this American Jewish liberator, came, liberated her from the darkness, but showed her kindness and pulled her back into humanity. And I think it's that kindness, that humanity, which she kind of held on to for the rest of her life. And that's why she kept that banknote. And amazing. I think kind of when you go full circle, it's kind of crazy to realise that's probably why God put that banknote in my hands to then share, so that she could continue to kind of share light into the world, even during COVID and much kind of further on into the future.
It reminds me of a beautiful Gemara, the Talmud, that says that in the biblical story of Boaz and Ruth is just this convert girl, has come in, seems to be having a tough time. He goes and gives her some grains and a bit of a moment of positivity, and that's it. And the Talmud basically makes the point that if he'd have known that was going to be recorded in the biblical text forever, they'd given her gold. And I remember that being explained to me. We would look at this figure Boaz, right? We'd say he's a prophet, he's a judge, he's a military leader, he's everything. You would write a multi-volume biography of him. He wouldn't even remember that he once walked past and gave, this girl who was struggling a bit of support. And yet from that, the messianic lineage comes, King David comes. And what it's saying is that those small actions, I bet you, I wouldn't surprise me if that American soldier had forgotten they ever did it. Right?
I'm almost certain.
Very possible. And he doesn't realize that act of kindness, that in his mind might have just been a tiny, forgettable detail, to one person ended up lifting a person, potentially impacting the way they built the family, including you, and ultimately reach millions and billions of people. It's an incredible thing. Every act of good. And I think what you're saying to me, and this is so powerful, the messianic end of history is built out of warmth, smiles, and goodness. The antidote to darkness and hatred is just genuineness and goodness. And really the real way we have to fight anti-Semitism, yes, we've got to call it out when we see it, for sure. We've got to, shine a light on it. But the ultimate antidote is, if we're hated, almost like from dark, venomous, pained voices of the world, is just shine a light into the world.
Exactly.
And that is really the incredible secret.
And I think it's the Jewish story. This isn't just the Holocaust. It's look at Hanukkah, which just recently passed in the past few months. It's all about, I mean, not all about, a much wider story of a clash of civilizations, etc. But today, what's the message today? I think one of those key messages is that we can be the light. Why do you increase in the light? It's because, firstly, you light that light on the first night, but you have to keep going. You have to keep lighting it. You have to keep increasing in light.
Yeah.
And you have to be the one who not only searches for the oil, but who then lights it and who continues to carry with you that torch, that light for the rest of your life. Because if you don't, then it won't.
It's so beautiful. This is what we've got to give the world. This has got to be.
Well,
no, it really is. The stuff you're doing, it's really, really incredible. Really
Thank you.
amazing. Thank you so much for stopping by, and thank you so much for sharing, and thank you so much for all the incredible work you do to keep the shining, beautiful light of Lily Ebert, of your great-grandmother, out in the world, lighting up the whole world.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to have shared it with you.
Dov, thank you so much. For me, this is just so inspiring. Everything I watch about Lily and everything I think about in all the survivors we know, just the most incredible people. But this conversation has been absolutely incredible. I want to finish by looking together at one of those beautiful clips, another one of those beautiful clips that you put on. But just before we say goodbye and look at that clip and say goodbye, I want to just also, those who like this content, please do remember to like, to subscribe, and to click on the notification button so that you get to know as soon as new content comes.
10,570.
Did you keep your strength? Lily, how did you keep your faith, your hope, your strength during that time?
I don't know.
Yeah.
But I said I have to, because the world must know what's really happened. Know the important is something like that will not happen to anybody in the world.
Well, we work very hard to make sure that it doesn't, and part of how it will not happen again is people like you reminding us of the horrors of the past. You are an extraordinary lady, Lily, an extraordinary lady, and it's a real privilege to spend some time with you. I won't forget our meeting, and I will make sure that your story continues to be told.